So I'm going to close up now just by saying those are some examples, some really creative things that are happening all over the country as people wrestle with how do we reconfigure ourselves so we can have some new creative alternatives. I was hired by the Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota Foundation a couple of years ago to do a study of the Minnesota food system because they have $8 billion of money. They wanted a tobacco settlement from the tobacco industry because they sued the industry saying our healthcare costs are significantly higher because you advertised and sold cigarettes. They put a big portion of that money into passing a statewide smoking ban in Minnesota. And when they were done with that, they said, we don't see any big legislative victories we can win with this money, so we want to tackle the next most important issue regarding health, and we noticed that food is the #2 leading cause of death. So they invested in a Healthy Eating Minnesota campaign and asked me to do a study of how the Minnesota food economy works so they can really make decisions about how to invest their money. I interviewed multi-million-dollar businesses who are doing distribution efforts, meat processing, a seafood sales distribution service, several others, and what they all said to me was, this is basically about building relationships that are reciprocal and loyal. It's not about squeezing the margin out of each other. It's not about trying to be the most productive person possible. It's about working out of loyalty and reciprocity to really have lasting cohesion over time. We like that because we don't know what the future is bringing. We have a lot of uncertainty. We see things changing a lot in our lives here. We need to be able to be resilient to that change, and it's that social connectivity we have with each other that allows us to be resilient as we see things change. And we really have a priority of recycling resources, including money, into our communities. And that 3 R's of reciprocity, resilience, and recycling are guide words of multi-million-dollar businesses in Minnesota who are on the cutting edge of creating a new alternative that creates better food and health options for Minnesotans. And what's interesting is one of the apple producers that I spoke with, who's actually importing apples from Washington State to the Twin Cities market, raises his own apples, has a really high-quality cider product and so on. He said, I produce really high-quality apples, and the market has no way of rewarding that quality. My apples spend 5 months on my tree, and they gain this much in value. 36 hours after they leave my farm, their value has tripled. He said, this market will not work for us, and he's a successful multi-million-dollar businessman, but this market, he said, will not work for us until the market can reward quality. All they care about now is price and quantity. And I would say these are the watchwords that I would say, at least in Minnesota and perhaps even here, that would guide the kind of value networks we'd like to see in the future. We will also need to talk about federal policy at some point when we have the power to shape that in a better way. One of the problems we've had in federal policy is it's thrown cash after commodities. Oh, I lost my slide. It's thrown cash after commodities, which actually has had the result of taking wealth out of our communities because it's supported people to produce things they cannot afford to produce at levels higher than is really efficient, and forced farmers to spend interest on loans that meant money left their communities. I'd really ask that the federal government start thinking about how to make investments in communities of the kind that might fuel a local processing distribution center or a local food artisanal creation center that really involve lasting investments that build the kind of health, wealth, connection, and capacity we'd like to see in our food system. That is all I want to say tonight. Thank you for a lot of patience in a dark room with a lot of slides and numbers. But if we have some time, I take some questions. You may want to move on to the comments or the movie. What do you like to do?
I think we should do some questions if people have them.
Okay. So anybody have any reactions or things they'd like to add or question about what I said? Yes, in the back.
I watched a program on television. It was a King Corn was the name of the production, and basically tied a lot of this back to the USDA and Earl Butts' time to try and make production keep food inexpensive and increase production.
Right.
Do you agree with that? And corn is
Well, King Corn's a wonderful movie. I have a copy, and I really enjoy their sense of humor about laying out some very difficult economic and kind of social questions. For those of you who have not seen it, it sort of follows two young folks who rent an acre of land in Iowa to sort of tell the story, use that acre to tell the story of how the corn industry works and doesn't work in this country. I think the Earl Butz interview is the same story I told about OPEC. Basically, he was the one who went on television and told farmers, plant fence for the fence row, produce as much as you can, and if you do not get big, get out of the business because you will not be competitive. That was the man who really led the charge publicly. And I think that the version in the movie is quite accurate about that, and also about other issues they take on. I have no real quarrel with the film. I think it's a really good way to learn about some pretty complex issues. It looks like I put everybody to sleep now, so I'll be around here for a little while tonight if anybody wants to come up and color me privately and tell me what they liked or didn't like about what I said. But I really appreciate your taking time to listen to a fairly detailed story, and it was longer than I intended because I couldn't click these things, but I really have enjoyed learning about the vision you have here. I think that some of these ideas may help you articulate both some numbers that would help you argue the case for the local food center you would like to create, but also give you some thoughts about how to do that in a different way. And if I can help you, be happy to. And one way that I might be able to help is to do some economic studies of your region the same way I did for the Gorge Bone region or others. So thank you very much.
You know,
You have a question,
I
also.
thought of a question, and I thought of it in the middle. Of course, you can't remember it.
You get to do that, yeah.
Why has the revenue for agriculture in Washington declined less than Oregon?
I don't totally know. I think my guess is it has to do with this has been a time of big expansion of the Washington apple export industry. I think that's been relatively lucrative. In general, the products that are not subsidized do better because the subsidies help you produce at a loss. And people would not expand the market for apples unless there was somebody buying enough, paying enough to make it worth their while. It's also possible that there's been enough new production in Washington that wasn't there in '69 that it just sort of has become a stronger industry. That needs a lot more study than I've had the time or the presence to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ken.